October. My name is Councillor Gary Marsh. I'm the chairman of the committee. To my left is my vice chairman, Councillor Kennedy. To my right is Steve King, who's the team leader for major developments. To his right is Paul Weeks, our legal officer. To his right is Jo, she's been promoted and she's going to be remaining in the chamber, are you? Yep. In the far corners on either side of me are members from the committee, services, I got that wrong, and in front of me are the councillors who are going to make the decision. So item 1 on the agenda is to note substitutes. I have none. Item 2, which means I don't have any apologies for absence. Item 3, receive declaration of interest for any members in respect of on the agenda. Oh. Item 4, to agree by general affirmation the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of September. Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. I will sign and initial each one. Item 5 is to consider any items that I agreed to take as urgent business. I have none, which brings us to the substantive part of this meeting. Well, the first agenda is item 6, which is DM 241139 land at 147 to 149 College Road. Hurstpier Point. This one's yours, Jo.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Just to draw members' attention to the update sheet, we have had 6 additional letters of objection that have come in since the committee report has been published. And you have all got copies of that update sheet summarising those representations of objection that have also come in. So planning permission is sought for the erection of 7 detached dwellings with new access from College Lane, together with parking, landscaping and associated works. So we've got the location plan here. Outlined in red is the application site here. The application site sits between 143, 147 and to the rear of 147 and 149 College Lane. It's currently used as grassland for the grazing of sheep. The main part of the site is set back from College Lane, situated between the 2 existing properties of 147 and 149. These properties are a detached bungalow and a chalet bungalow, each with separate detached garages, and these are both set back from the road. The front of the site is set at a slightly higher level than the highway, and to the rear the land gently slopes away from the south to the north. There are small fruit trees within the site, with a mature hedgerow and several larger, more mature oak trees along the rear eastern boundary here. To the north, the boundary is marked by an existing hedgerow. Surrounding the site to the south and west, there is a mixture in design and scale of dwellings. We have also got a bit further down at College Place down here, some rearward development of 2 properties. There is a Grade 2 listed building here, Grove Cottage, number 122, College Lane, which is a 2-storey dwelling. To the north and to the east are fields. So just to let members know, the application site here is outlined in red, and the black line is the built-up area boundary of Hurstpier Point. So whilst the site falls within the countryside where additional housing is not normally accepted, part of the site is contiguous with the existing built-up area settlement of Hurstpier Point, which can be seen on this black line here. In adjacent to the application site here. For the reasons set out in the report, it is considered the proposal complies with policy DP6 of the district plan, which allows for windfall development in the countryside when it is contiguous with the development boundary. The whole of the site does not need to be contiguous for this policy to apply. So turning to the site plan, the development would be accessed from College Lane at this point via a new vehicle access to the southern side of 147 College Lane, which is here. The access would be 5.2 metres wide with a shared surface and a separate footway at this point, just where I'm showing here now, for the initial part of the site. The new shared surface driveway would have soft landscaping and trees planted on both sides to provide a landscaped area into the site. The houses would be situated to the rear of the site between the existing properties fronting College Lane. These would be arranged in an L shape, and a turning head is incorporated within the layout. The dwellings would be set on generous plots, and off-street parking is provided for all dwellings in the form of private driveways to the sides of the house, except for plot 7, where the parking is to be to the front. A total of 17 car parking spaces would be provided, comprising of 16 allocated spaces plus an additional dedicated visitor space here along the shared driveway. The development would comprise of a mixture of dwellings consisting of a 2-bed bungalow, which is here, and then you've got 4 3-bed properties here, and plot 4 and plot 1 would be 4-bed houses. So just turning to the elevations. So this is the design for the 4-bed properties and their floor plans, and this is for the 3-bed properties and their floor plans, and this is for the bungalow, which is proposed as well. And this is an internal street scene, so members can see in context of them all, of most of them together. The design, scale and materials of the dwellings are considered appropriate to the character of the area, where there is a mixture in design and scale of properties. The design is sensitive to the semi-rural character, with properties being of a traditional design and materials typical of a rural setting of brick, weatherboarding and tiled roofs. The variations in the design of the properties would add to the visual interest to the proposed cul-de-sac. The cul-de-sac nature, design and proposed landscaping of the development seeks to create a sense of place whilst addressing the character of the surrounding buildings and landscape. The development provides a suitable size and mix of dwellings to meet current and future needs of different groups within the community. In terms of sustainability, the development is to have a fabric-first approach. Details of the measures are set out in para 12.68 of the officer's report and would result in the development achieving a 53% reduction in carbon emissions. Each dwelling would also have secure bike storage and an active electric car charging point. So we've also got a street scene shown from College Lane, shown in context with 147 and 149, College Lane itself. So it's acknowledged the proposal would form rearward development. However, due to the position set behind 2 existing properties, the proposed screening and the development being a similar ridgeline to 147 and 149, it would not result in a prominent form of development within the area. Whilst the dwellings are set behind the existing dwellings, these are well spaced and would still allow intervening views between the properties. Although the proposal is to be in a rearward position, the design is sensitive to the character of the area, and the vegetative boundaries of the site would be reinforced and retained, would soften the appearance of the development. The proposal is therefore considered to preserve the semi-rural character of the area and the surrounding landscape. The proposal is considered to comply with policies DP12, DP26 and DP39 of the district plan and policies Hurst C1, C3 and H1 of the neighbourhood plan. So we've got a landscape plan here. As set out in the report, the proposal would exceed the required 10% on-site biodiversity net gain, providing a 27.36% gain in habitat units, resulting in an enhancement in the site to biodiversity. The development, whilst resulting in the loss of a paddock, would not result in harm to the ecology. Whilst there would be a loss to some trees on the site to facilitate the development, there is to be replacement and additional tree planting to mitigate the loss. Oh, beg your pardon. To mitigate the loss as shown around the boundaries of the site here and within the site, as well as retaining the trees here, here and here. The Council's ecology consultant and the tree officer supports the proposal, and the proposal therefore complies with policies DP37 and DP38 of the district plan. So just turning to some photographs, this is showing the front of the site where the access is to go, and you can just see in context with College Lane, this is where the access is to go, where this existing hedge is. So the site lies within the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. The Highways Authority has considered the proposal and raised no objection to the scheme. They're satisfied that the access would provide suitable visibility displays. In addition, they consider the development would not cause capacity concerns on the operation of the local highway network. They conclude the proposal would not have an unacceptable impact on highway safety or result in a severe cumulative impact on the operation of the highway network. The proposal therefore complies with DP21 of the district plan in relation to transport. So this is a photo showing Grove Cottage, 122 College Lane, opposite the site, which is a Grade 2 listed building referred to within the officer's report. And this is where this part is, this is where the access is to go. So the proposal is opposite the Grade 2 listed building of Grove Cottage. The access into the site would be directly visible from the listed building opposite the site. This would be out-landscaped in order to minimise its impact, and the houses would be set approximately 88 metres from the frontage of Grove Cottage. The proposal would result in less than substantial harm to the setting of this listed building. Under para 208 of the MPPF, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal. Whilst this is a small-scale development, the formation of the dwellings are considered to result in public benefits, as it would result in construction jobs over the life of the build and the increased population likely to spend in the community. The proposal would provide windfall development, which would add to the council's housing land supply and provide a mix in the type of housing. It's considered that these public benefits would outweigh the less than substantial harm. So we've just got some other photographs showing the site. So this is, again, the access looking further back. This is within the site and the rear of 147 and 149 College Lane, and where the L part would be here with the bungalow in this location. So again, that's in relation to 149 and looking from the northern boundary of the site here as well, with some of these trees on this eastern boundary to be retained. Just some further photos showing houses on the opposite side of College Lane, which can be seen from views of the land. Again here, and this is the northern boundary looking to the further fields beyond, which would remain. So just turning to other issues within the report. In terms of drainage, the proposal is to use a pumped surface water system and would also connect to the foul sewer. The council's drainage engineer has considered this and advised that there is no other solution for managing surface water runoff from the site other than the use of a pump, and that any failure and/or exceedance should not adversely affect homes on the site or adjacent downhill areas. Therefore, it's considered acceptable in terms of flood risk and complies with policy DP 41 of the district plan. In terms of residential amenity, this is set out in detail in paras 12.52 to 12.63 of the report. Due to the position of the dwellings and the landscape proposed, the development would not result in significant harm through overlooking, loss of amenity, or an overbearing impact to the surrounding residential properties. In terms of infrastructure, contributions are set out in 12.110 of the report, and works on the legal agreement are progressing. For the reasons set out in the report and within the presentation, whilst it's acknowledged that there is a conflict with policy DP 34 in terms of heritage, it is considered that the proposal complies with the development plan when read as a whole, which is the proper basis for decision making. As such, the application is recommended for approval. Just to make members aware that there is a dual recommendation, which is that planning permission is approved subject to the completion of a satisfactory 106 legal agreement and the conditions set out in Appendix A of the report. However, there is a recommendation B that if the legal agreement is not completed and a satisfactory legal agreement is not completed, that there is the option to refuse the application in respect of infrastructure contributions. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Jo. We do have 3 speakers, so I'm going to call Professor Tony Kenyon, please, if you can come to where it says public speaker and press the right-hand button. The red light will come on and you have 2 minutes to speak. On that screen in front of me is a countdown clock, and when you get to after 90 seconds, I will say you've got 30 seconds. It's not there yet until you start talking. Okay, so press the right-hand button, start talking, you'll see the numbers come up.
So, thank you. I want to first of all put to bed the idea that we are just a bunch of NIMBYs who don't want development simply because we don't like it. This is how we're being treated, and this is nonsense. Our objection is a simple one. There is a democratically approved district plan that provides sufficient housing for the district's needs. The plan defines a development boundary and specifies that building will not be permitted outside this except in exceptional circumstances. These, however, are not exceptional circumstances, and the council's own figures show that we have more than 5 years' supply of building land. These 7 houses are therefore not needed. The planning officer acknowledges that the NPPF tipping balance does not apply and that principles set out in the district plan are violated, DP 34. She then dismisses this subjectively and out of hand. We also contend that on careful reading, the development violates Hurst CP1, DP6, DP15 and DP26, despite what is written in the report. The site falls within countryside where additional housing is not normally accepted and the development does not maintain or enhance the quality of the rural landscape character of the parish. The district plan is being ignored, as are the objections of more than 70 local residents and the recommendation of the parish council to reject the application. The process has been handled very badly from the start, with consultation deadlines moved arbitrarily without notice, ward councillors telling us that our objections are not valid before reading them, the proposal not initially being called in despite meeting the threshold of more than 5 houses, proper notification of the planning committee meeting not being given to residents, some only heard about this today, and with key parts of the highways report being arbitrarily redacted. So what is the point of having a district plan if it is to be ignored? If you break your own policy rules now, you'll have to break them for the 2 adjacent fields in the future. Today, I watched a surveyor surveying these very fields. My fellow residents
you've got
have
10
followed the
seconds,
rules.
sorry.
Well, this is the wrong development in the wrong place at the wrong time. Please reject it and uphold the democratic view of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I was reading you and not looking at that. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kenton. And can I call is it Alan? Have I got the right one? Yep, Alan Gwynn Jones, please. Gun Jones, sorry. Same. As soon as you start to press the button, your 2 minutes starts.
Chair, committee members, this afternoon you are being recommended to approve a development proposal that conflicts with the settlement and heritage policies in the adopted development plans. DP6 requires that to be acceptable development sites should be contiguous with the edge of the settlement. In this case, only a small section of the access road is contiguous with the edge of the settlement. The remainder and majority of the site where the development will be located is not. It is located within the open countryside, outside of the built-up area of Hurst Point, and this is accepted by your officers and by the applicants. Our letter of objection contained map extracts to demonstrate this. The proposed development will cause harm to the setting of the Grade 2 listed Grove Cottage, and this is the view of the Council's Conservation Officer. Public benefits are therefore required to outweigh such harm. Your officers have advanced public benefits in the form of 7 dwellings, construction jobs and increased spend to outweigh the conflict. However, such benefits are modest and include no public heritage benefits. They are wholly inadequate to compensate for a development proposal that constitutes such a significant breach of the established settlement limits and a substantial and irreversible incursion into the open countryside. The residents whom I represent subscribe to the neighbourhood plan, which received 92.4% support from the local electorate when put to the vote at the referendum stage.
30 seconds.
They would not recognise any public benefits being generated by the development. These residents, the parish council, fellow residents, have a legitimate expectations that the policies in the neighbourhood plan will be upheld. For this reason, I urge you to refuse the application on clear conflict with settlement and heritage policies in the development plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm calling Andrew Metcalfe in support of this application, please. Two minutes.
Good afternoon, councillors, officers and members of the public. My name is Andrew Metcalfe and I'm a director at Squires Planning. This evening I'm here to say a few words about this proposal by Earlswood Homes. For those who do not know, they are a multi-award-winning SME house builder with a strong local presence in the district. They create high-quality housing of all sizes, and it is my pleasure to be able to represent them this afternoon. This is a proposal for a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes, with the 2-bedroom home being a bungalow designed to meet Part M42 accessible and adaptable accessibility standards. The site is contiguous with the settlement boundary of Hurst Point. As discussed by your officer, the site is therefore policy DP6 compliant, meaning that this proposal is supported by the development plan in principle. It is also noted that this support would continue in the future through policy DPH2 in the emerging plan. Regarding impacts, as you have heard, they will be minimal on neighbouring dwellings, and there are no objections on technical matters such as drainage, highways and parking, with all being considered acceptable by the relevant statutory consultee. Less than substantial harm on the setting of the Grade 2 listed Grove Cottage has been identified in the committee report. However, the report identifies a number of public benefits, ranging from construction jobs through to the provision of windfall homes, which your officer concludes outweigh this less than substantial harm, and I agree. A testament to Earlwood Homes' intention on the site is the provision of biodiversity net gain equating to some 27.36%, significantly more than the statutory requirement of 10%, and a consideration that weighs favour of the scheme. Alongside this, the scheme will, through a Section 106 agreement, provide financial contributions towards locally important infrastructure. This includes schools, Hurstpierpoint Point Library, active travel improvements, and improvements at the South Avenue Recreation Ground, such as the Lawn Tennis Club and the Bowls Club, and money towards a new cycle link. In conclusion, this proposal provides 7 high-quality dwellings towards the Council's windfall allowance on a policy-compliant site. We therefore respectfully request that councillors accept your officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Right, before we start any debate, I would like just to clarify a couple of points that was made by Professor Kenyon. Joe, could you just to explain to the committee, and I'm sure they know anyway, what contiguous means? I know it's not the housing. I know what contiguous is, but our definition is. I know what it means.
Just bring it up so and give you the actual full-on definition set out in the district plan.
If you could, please, because I think it's important.
It's in the back, in the glossary. On page 118, if you've got your district plan in front of you, contiguous, sharing a common border or touching. And as shown in this plan, it shares the common border here in terms of its access. And as set out in my presentation, it does not have to touch the whole of the site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew you all knew that, but I wanted everybody didn't know that, who's watching us on YouTube, to know that. Okay, now there are a couple of points that we do have a democratically approved district plan which does provide a 5-year land supply, but all members know that when a house within the 5-year land supply gets built, sold and somebody moves in, it drops off our 5-year land supply. So therefore we need to have a continuous input of additional houses the whole way through, and so therefore it is relevant for this to be, and it does fall in the windfall aspect. Now, I've said enough. Does anybody else wish to say anything? Silence. Oh, Councillor de Bale. Yeah, keep it on.
I must admit, looking at this, it looks a very classy development for a very classy town village. And I think it would, personally, I think it would fit in quite nicely. All of us have to expect that housing is going to keep on increasing where we live. We put up with this wherever we live at the moment. So rather than it being a bunch of houses just crammed onto a site, personally, I think this is very classy. Thank you.
I'm actually thinking it's given somebody who lives in Hurstpierpoint a chance to downsize to a bungalow should they need to, and thus freeing up a bigger house within Hurstpierpoint. That's the bit which I did see Councillor Henwood before you, Councillor Kenny. So
I seem to have disappeared. Okay, so
probably not.
I have several comments to make.
Okay.
First of all, it is obviously outside the built-up area boundary.
We've just had the contiguous bit.
Yeah, continuous means touching. Everything's got to touch. We're all going to be touching something. So I'm sorry, I don't feel that justifies, sorry, I understood it. I don't feel it justifies this being an outside the built-up area. That's the first comment that I wish to make. I also wish to make, it's in the countryside, which is also another of our policies, which I will get to, DP 12. It would not enhance or provide or maintain better the quality of the rural and landscape character. They would not be doing that. If we look at several comments, if we look at 12.17, I'm looking here, 12.17. Okay, page 180 of the NPPF actually says it should enhance the natural and local environment by recognizing intrinsic character of beauty of the countryside, which this would not, obviously, it would be damaging. We've always, opposite 12, I'm on to 1230, where we talk about opposite 12.30, intrinsic character of the countryside, and against the different policies. Then we go on to, I'm quite interested in the Conservation Officer's comments, page 25, referring to the listed building on page 25.
Is there a question here? I know you're just making comments, but is there actually a question?
I do have a question. I particularly have a question about the sewage. I have a particular question about whether the sewage from this development of seven houses will combine with the runoff, surface runoff, which has been highlighted already as a problem in this road, whether all of that water and sewage will be going into the 300 millimeter pipe up on the road. Now, is that going to collect all of the runoff and all of the sewage from these seven houses? That is a definite question.
That's a definite question.
Yes,
It's
sir.
definitely a question, that is.
Thank you.
Joe, could you answer the definite question, please? I think the rest were just comments.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a drainage expert, so drainage is set out on page 32 to 33 of the report. And as I set out in my presentation, there is to be a surface water, the surface water is to have a pump system, which would then feed back in to manage the surface water runoff, and the foul water would go into the existing foul situation and the foul sewer pipe.
Sorry.
There's a condition.
Chairman, I'm not too clear. My question was, if all the runoff water going downhill, sort of, not hill, but, you know, down into these seven houses, is that runoff water going to be combined with the sewage from the seven houses pumped up into the 300 millimeter? Because they're already having trouble with surface water runoff. So this is, and we know what Southern Water do when they got too much. So that's not exactly, you know, that's my question.
Well, there is a condition, and should they breach that condition, then there will be a breach in the condition, and we will do something about it. That's correct?
Yeah, and also just to clarify, the application can only deal with the surface water for this development. It can't improve and deal with the existing situation. So the existing situation is how it is, and this development looks at using the pumps strategy and system to deal with and control surface water that will be created for this development.
Okay, thank you. And Chairman, we know there is a problem already on the road with the surface runoff.
That's every road in mid-Sussex
yes.
when it rains. It
Not
rains.
everybody, but thank you.
It certainly does in my part
Thank
of the
you.
world.
I'll come back later, Chairman.
Well, we'll see. Councillor Hember, could you switch off, please? Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, so I want to continue on the same infrastructure theme. There was one aspect of this, Janice's questions, which wasn't clear. So the report states that, yes, the properties will be connected to the main sewer. It doesn't refer to an item that was brought up by one of the objectors, that there are problems with the capacity of the main sewer anyway, all the way down College Lane. And so I'd like to ask Janice if that's something that has come up in any of the deliberations. There was reference to at times raw sewage going into fields. So question for Janice,
No, that's Joe.
Sorry, for Joe, sorry, I do apologise. Question for Joe. Has explicitly the subject of the capacity of the sewer of all the buildings down College Lane been addressed? So that's the first of my infrastructure points. My Second one, it's about the traffic, so maybe it's not an infrastructure point, it's certainly an accessible transport. So when I visited the site, I was struck by it's quite a long distance from the site. It is right on the very built-up edge of Hurstpit Point, quite a long distance to the bus stops on the main road. And a considerable portion of that route has no footpath at all. And I didn't visit it at night time, and I know there's street lighting, but it didn't look like a very welcoming environment to walk into Hurstpit Point. My sort of rough, ad hoc conclusion was that this is going to basically be a car access location. So I worried about accessible transport. So what was referred to was how long it takes to get to the bus stops, but there was no real explicit discussion of whether or not there was a decent footpath to walk to along the way. I'm sure that cycling will be fine because it's a quiet enough road to do that. Like others, though, I think that the word contiguous here is doing an awful lot of heavy lifting. We can all interpret these things in different ways. One would tend to think that contiguous implied something like a building line. As Joe has said, there's no doubt that this is building behind the building line, and the only element that's contiguous is really the access route, which is taking you off to a site which is elsewhere. So those are my observations.
Yeah, we had exactly the same in Balcombe, and that was classed as contiguous, unfortunately. They went past a house, and it was a back garden development, but they conflicted other bits and pieces. If you go to page 33, 1281, Southern Water being consulted on the application, note that from their investigation, they can facilitate. Now, what we think about Southern Water is another thing altogether. But if they say they can do it, then they can do it. And in terms of, they're lucky to have buses, because we don't have any buses. So that's not being facetious at all. Councillor Cherry.
Yes.
All your questions were answered? Yes, they were. Okay. Councillor Cherry.
Yes, certainly on reading the report, both the drainage issues and the highways issues I had particular concerns with, particularly as both highways see no problems with a site which is actually a very narrow road with no pavement, already congested. I go down there quite a lot myself. And also the entrance to the site is on a bend. So very unhappy about that, and I'm absolutely amazed that highways see no problems. With the drainage, a lot of very valid points have already been made, so I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but to say that I totally agree with them. But it all seems, there's clearly a clear drainage problem there existing, and it all sounds a bit Heath Robinson to me, that the flood risk, which is already recognised, is going to be dealt with a pumped surface water solution to be adopted, which would apparently need to be designed, according to the report, by Southern Water. So I'm sure, we can all feel reassured with that one. So I don't know what guarantees we have that this particular pumped surface water solution is going to be adequate, but there we are. So that's something else to think about. My last point is on the proposed landscaping, which is going to disguise it all. There's no mention of what this landscaping actually consists of, and what guarantees do we have that it's actually going to be put in, and after it's all there, who is going to be responsible for its care? I often hear with this that trees are going to be replaced and all the rest of it, and then 2 years down the line, half of it's died because nobody's looking after it properly. So I'd like some answers there, please.
I would have thought there'd be a management scheme put in place for and it'd be 5 years, but if a tree goes in or a substantial bush goes in, if it dies within that time, it's down to the developer or the management scheme to replace it. I can't quite work out what you said about the bend. If the bend was a left to right, I would agree with you. But as it goes right to left, you've got the best of both worlds in terms of visibility displays.
We've
As a
got no
dri-
pavement there and.
There's no pavement on a lot of roads in the countryside.
It's still, to me, it presents hazards to pedestrians and indeed drivers.
I think we'll have to beg to differ on that one. The two ward councillors didn't see a problem with this, so they didn't call it in. So, and bearing in mind, one's an MP now, so she didn't think it was worth to be called in. Councillor Hitchcock, could you switch yours off? Thank you.
2 questions, please, for Joe. Is there a surface water sewer in the highway?
Hospital pass.
I don't know that exact answer, I'm
Okay.
afraid. I'm not a drainage expert.
And if not, where is the pump discharge going to go to?
It should be pumped into it, I would have thought so, but
Is it
unless
going into
you...
a ditch, for example, or is it going into a culvert, or what?
Well, it says it's going into the 300 mil foul water.
Well, it won't, will it? They don't mix them anymore.
They don't, you're right, they don't. I think, does the condition for drainage, would that have all the details in that?
Yes, so the condition on drainage would require further information. So we've already had the surface water pump failure and mitigation strategy, and the drainage engineer is happy with the surface water being pumped to capture and to go to the sewers. But the further details would be covered by the condition.
Okay. Second question. If we decided to approve this and the thing was built out, does that make all of the surrounding land contiguous with the then boundary?
That is a good question. That is if, when the new district plan comes in, then I would assume the built-up area boundary.
Can I?
Yes,
So
can you answer that one?
the built-up area boundary would remain as it is drawn, just because new development then becomes contiguous, does not change the position of the development boundary.
Okay.
It would only change
So the
if a new
surrounding
district plan
land would need
updated
to be
it.
contiguous with the existing boundary.
It would have to be contiguous with the existing
Okay.
boundary, not
I
this
think that
development.
needs to be clarified because we've got some worried people behind us who are looking at the future of their land.
Yeah, I think it's, neighbourhood plans can revisit it and request it, the boundary change to be, but it's down to a request from the parish council. But you're right, I don't think
The district, any new district plan could update a development boundary, but if this were to be approved, the development boundary would remain as it is until at that time it was revisited.
Okay. Not good.
Councillor Henwood, new question.
Yes, I have 2 questions. Page 25, 1, 2, 3, the fifth, 1, 2, 3, the 6th paragraph down says categorically that the conservation officer says the proposal will also be contrary to the requirements of District Plan Policy DP 34. And then in the next paragraph, we have, I would like to know why the officers have now agreed that the damage perceived by the conservation officer, they don't think it's significant. So that's my question. Why have they more or less dismissed what the conservation officer deemed as a contrary to our district plan DP 34? That's my question. That's the first question, Chairman.
I can answer that one, and I'll
Okay.
let Joe do a better answer to it. Conservation officer is a consultee for the officers, and as you heard Joe say, she's taken in the round of all the benefits, not just laboured into one of it, and she said it was less than substantial. So this is what it means. If it's less than substantial, yes, there is recognised harm. However, the other benefits outweigh the harm, hence the fact less than substantial. It happens across the whole district. We've had plenty of
I
indications
understand.
in this committee
Yeah.
on that.
It seems to be a matter of judgment.
And the judgment in this case is Joe's
Okay.
judgment.
Okay, that's my question.
Okay.
My second question is, of course, timescale. We have down here on page 34, 12.89, we have this 27.36% increase in biodiversity. Given that 20 trees, a hedgerow, a grassland will be demolished and covered with tarmac or concrete, my question is, what time scale will we have the trees growing? Will we have the wildflower meadow? Because I feel like when we talk about this biodiversity net gain, Chairman, we should have some timelines engaged. We've had this discussion before, and we're destroying biodiversity to start with. I've got on page 34, it's 12.89, and we know the trees are going to be cut. We need some timeline. We're to respect our intelligence, Chairman.
You asked this last meeting,
I did.
Councillor, and I did go back to the officers, and as you know, Steve Ashdown, who is the Development Control Manager, we've had the discussion with the senior management team. They are rather tied up on the district plan examination. Okay. Once the examination is over, because of the request of this committee, and it wouldn't be any harm for the other committee to have some about this training, we will have training on biodiversity. But can I draw your attention to page 44, which you conveniently not put in? Condition 7.
Page 44
Condition 7, it's all to do biodiversity.
Okay.
I'm not telling you what trees they're going to put in, because that's not really for this report. But it will be put in, and it will be part of it.
Okay.
Because each time they get to a condition, they have to discharge those conditions to the satisfaction of the planning officer. Joe, have I got that right or wrong?
No, that's fine, but also I'd like to draw your attention to condition 19, which is specifically about the landscaping scheme. And so the landscaping has to be put in place prior to the occupation of any part of the development as well. So the trees and wildflower meadow will have to be there before the houses are occupied.
So Chairman, all I'm asking is if we could have, when we have the reports on this 27%, 10%, we could have some timeline. Let's be real and say in 20 years' time or in 10 years' time, or it is hoped that, because otherwise it's not.
If they don't meet the, correct me wrong, and this is legal as well, if they don't meet their biodiversity net gain, they don't get permission.
But you don't meet it if you're just planting young trees and a flower meadow.
Well, you don't expect to plant a 150-year-old oak in the middle of a...
I think you get my point, Chairman.
I think we'll wait till we have the training, because I think you're looking for semantics there, to be perfectly honest. Councillor Brown, levity, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm interested in the drainage issues that have been discussed under biodiversity net gain. I just mentioned that it does say 1,562% increase in hedgerow biodiversity net gain. So I won't pursue a question on that, but I can hardly believe it. My first question is about point 13.7, about the Grove Cottage opposite the entrance. And it seems to me, there's headlights from the traffic in the dark are going to come immediately opposite that. Wouldn't that be an intolerable burden for the residents of this listed property? Question one. Question two is about the sustainability of the site, and I'm heartened to hear that the properties are, what's the word? Anyway, they're efficient, let's put it like that. But it's the question of walking from the site, with there being no footway on College Road. I mean, it means that people are going to be driving exclusively. And it seems to me there are plenty, well, this is a windfall site. It's it's far from ideal. There are plenty of windfall sites in the villages that are much more suitable than that. So, I mean, I know you're going to say, oh, it's a highways issue, but it's a significant issue. So I'm not sure I've got a question there, but yeah.
I think there was-ish. But you can't expect the developer, because he's only got, how wide is that Bournemouth? If they turn off on College Road, about 5-something metres?
5.2 metres is the width of the access.
Yeah, so 5.2 metres, you don't expect somebody who's got using 5.2 metres to provide a footpath all the way into Hurstpierpoint.
No, but Chairman, what about Section 106 money? Has any of that been allocated for that purpose?
No. I don't know. Joe, I don't think anything to that.
Thank you. So the Section 106 money, there has been TAD contributions to be spent on active travel improvements set out on page 38 of the report. And for the local community infrastructure, it would be provisions for future cycleway link between Brown Twins Road, Idenhurst and or street furniture. It wouldn't be reasonable to require for this size of development a footway all the way into Hurstpierpoint, plus also it is all on highway lands and lands that is not owned by the applicant, so it wouldn't be possible to do that. The site, however, can I just clarify, I appreciate your point about the walking and there not being footpaths, but you can cycle. There is going to be cycle parking provided, so that is also another sustainable means of transport to that.
Thank you. I noticed Mr. Metcalfe mentioned a new cycle lane, so perhaps that's what's
going towards it. That's £6,267 will go towards something like that. Okay. And little developments mean sometimes you get what we want. Yeah. A proper development, which does it. You've spoken, Councillor DeBell. I'm going to ask Councillor Sweatman before yourself first.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've listened to some interesting comments, but like I say, we have to make a decision what is in front of us today. And a lot of talk has been on drainage. So I mean, at the end of the day, Southern Water has to approve the pumping system. And incidentally, there is a second pump if the first one fails. So that will be combined sewer and surface runoff into that 300 millimetre sewer, as I understand it. The point was just mentioned by Councillor Brown about footpaths. Well, you've got existing houses nearby. They haven't got footpath. So, 7 extra houses, it doesn't really warrant a footpath. And I can't, if it was a big development, there may be, but and apart from the design and layout, it's nice to see there's a bungalow there, and it's a spacious layout with large rear gardens, and the design, I think, is very good. So personally, I've got no issues with this, and I think we actually have to look at our consultees. I mean, people mentioned about the highways and this, that, and the other. If we refuse it when our consultees have actually said there's no issue with it, especially highways and others, then we'll be heading for costs. It's sometimes we sit on these planning committees and sometimes we don't like the applications, but it's not a wish list. So we have to look at the planning policies. It's quasi-legal, and look at the development plan as a whole. So I think we need to understand that.
Like Councillor Chair, I actually know that road very well because I used to teach a great number of people from that school just down the road from it, and a lot of the houses can't actually have a footpath there because they're right adjacent to the road, and I don't think they would take very kind for us to knock down their front bedrooms and their front lawn to put a footpath in.
So really, I would have no issue in proposing this application for approval,
Okay.
Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor de Bell, did you want to? And then,
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a couple of points. First of all, it's been mentioned that there's no footpath, and yeah, that's 7 houses, but the whole of College Lane's got no footpath. That's not been there for some time, so I think that's quite irrelevant personally. And the second one is that it's been mentioned that the lights might shine into the window of a house opposite. Well, all the people along College Lane are shining lights into each other's properties as they go from opposite to each other. So I don't really feel that that is justifiable either. I would be more than happy to second Councillor Swetham's motion.
okay, I would say it doesn't have to be a Grade 2 listed building to have light shined into it, to be
Absolutely.
perfectly honest. Councillor Henwood, have you got a new point, please?
Well, actually,
Or you
I
haven't?
wanted to list the district council policies that this goes against, Chairman.
In your, what you think it goes against?
Well, in fact, we had a consultee called the conservation officer who was consulted and said that it was against DP 34, Councillor Switman. So we've had yeah.
It's less, this is a-
No,
You
no.
do. Look, Councillor Henwood, I don't want to school you on conservation officers, but they could actually be substantial, dangerously substantial sort of thing.
Okay.
And less substantial. Each one of them has some degree of harm.
Okay.
So this is the lowest harm that you could possibly have.
Okay.
So therefore, my church in my village
Okay.
is a Grade 2 listed building.
Okay.
When they come down Redbridge Lane and they put their headlights on, they're shining directly into the church, but that's across the
Okay.
road.
Okay, Chairman, I really feel that we have not addressed so many of our district council policies like build in the countryside. We have a list of DP 12, DP 15. We haven't even considered this is building in the countryside. And we have a policy that says not unless it enhances. We also have a DP 15 that says new homes in the countryside where special justification exists. We have all these policies.
Councillor Henwood, look, I hear where you're coming from. I sat on the previous district plan, I laid down, and I think you were on that working group about it as well, how we got this next one going through. And it does have this policy of contiguous. So the moment you have contiguous outside a built-up boundary, anywhere across the district, it's going to be in countryside. Anywhere. And that's the same in Balcombe, Hurstpierpoint, Burgess Hill. But if it's contiguous and it's 10 or less units, which this is, then it could be approved if it fulfills everything else. And this one has.
So, Chairman, it doesn't matter that we have, 4 other policies that this actually doesn't adhere to, just because it's contiguous to it touches, it's on the edge of a designated area to build, then it doesn't matter about our other policies, Chairman.
I
building
don't
the
really wish to prolong the debate on this. I think everybody's had a fair crack at it.
Okay.
It's in your gift not to vote for it. And I fully respect your views on this one. But before I go to Councillor Kenny, I just wish to speak, Steve, to mention a little bit about this BNG, because it is quite confusing, as we all know, from last time with the rugby club.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just on the BNG, it is something where I think further training for everyone will be helpful, because it is a relatively new thing that's come in from the government. But in terms of the 10% BNG that's required, it's a mandatory requirement for this type of application, and it's dealt with post the decision. So assuming, for argument's sake, that the application is approved at today's committee, following that decision, it will automatically have the condition requiring the submission of the biodiversity gain plan. And it's at that point that the developer will have to provide the details to discharge that condition, which will set out how they're going to meet the requirement for the minimum 10% or the increased, what they've said they're going to do on this application, obviously more than 10%. And that will set out the details of exactly what they're doing and the timescale. But the government, the way they've set it up, for better or for worse, it's a post-development system. So those details won't ever be before the planning committee. In the vast majority of cases, it will be dealt with after the decision. Just in terms of a few other things to pick up, in terms of the impact on the setting of the listed building, it's all in the committee report. But I think we've said there is a conflict with A policy in the district plan. In terms of the level of harm in the terminology of the NPPF, our view is that harm is less than substantial. And when you're in that territory, the NPPF then tells you to weigh that harm against the public benefits of the proposal. And that's what the report does. So I won't rehearse all of that. In terms of the highways and issues regarding capacity, again, it's all in the committee report, but a severe impact, which is the policy test, is a very high bar, and I expect that the government have set that deliberately high. So I think 7 units, without the support of the Highway Authority, it would be very, very difficult to say that there was a severe impact in terms of an impact on the highway network. And just on the drainage, I'm sure members are aware that developers do have a right to connect to the foul system. Looking on the mapping system, there's a foul sewer that runs down College Lane. The developers do have a right to connect to that foul system, and there are no objections from the technical objections in relation to drainage from our engineer or Southern Water. So again, I think we'd be on very difficult ground if members were seeking to resist the application on that basis. But I think that's probably all I want to say in terms of drawing it together, Chairman.
Councillor Kenny, you can draw the debate to close if you wish.
Well, okay. First of all, a quick point I want to address to the arguments put forward by Councillor DeBell and Councillor Sweatman. Because something is on a quiet country lane where houses were built years ago doesn't mean to say it's acceptable now. When we consider the accessible transport for this development, we should be considering it for the people who are going to live in this development. So it doesn't mean to say you add to an existing bad problem. And the whole character, clearly, of the lane has changed dramatically over the years. It never used to be littered with cars, as it currently is, almost all the way down, and dealing with the amounts of traffic that it currently does. So I just wanted to address that, because I think it's equally fallacious to say, just because it is, it must be all right. That's not, we should deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Just overall, my comments would be, yeah, we can go against DP6 where the public benefit outweighs building in the countryside. That's an interesting point. As much as anyone in this room, I absolutely recognise the need for more housing across the whole nation and in mid-Sussex. And I'm very much in favour of more housing. But in this particular case, certainly given the volume of objections locally and the concerns that I certainly still feel about the commitments of Southern Water and West Sussex County Council, in both cases I have experience of their nodding through of developments without requisite changes, leaving problems for mid-Sussex to deal with afterwards. So I have personal experience of that in developments where their judgments haven't been wholly to the good. So those things weigh on my mind, and they just make me think about, I'm not sure how much local public benefit this development brings to the residents of Hurstbear Point. It maybe adds to, for example, the issues about parking in the centre of the village, getting to the facilities in the centre of the village, and I have no idea, as we speak about, for example, capacity in local primary schools or issues like that. So those are the things which give me pause for thought as I make my mind up.
Okay. I have a proposer in Councillor Sweatman. I have a seconder in Councillor DeBell. Normal, we'll go to the vote, and normal, if you agree with the recommendation, which is up in front of you, I won't read it all out. There are two recommendations, but I'll take them together. If we're happy and they sign the Section 106 agreement, that's recommendation A. If we're happy and they don't sign the Section 106 agreement, it will be refused by Assistant Head of Director of Planning. So it's green for, red against, and yellow if you abstain. I've got all 12 now. Oh, actually, it's gone down to 11. Is it? Oh, 12. I've only got 11 on mine. Who's not voted?
741.
It's all up there. We're all. You're right. I can't add up. Sorry. I do apologise. Long day. That's been approved. That application has been approved. Thank you very much for your attendance. I'm afraid I know you didn't get what you particularly wanted, but you have to weigh up everything, and that's what this committee has to do. Right. We go to the next item on the agenda, which is in Slutham. If I can find it. This is DM 23217 for Slutham Manor, Slutham Place, Slutham, and this one's yours, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just before I begin, just flag up the further two representations that we've received that are on the update sheet. Won't go through those because members will have seen that and been able to read those further comments. So in terms of the application, this isn't a planning application. This is an application that seeks to modify an existing Section 106 legal agreement that's attached to a planning permission, DM 162531 at Slutham Manor. The applicants have said that because of increasing build costs, the scheme is no longer viable to provide the originally specified affordable housing contributions, and accordingly the applicants have requested that those contributions are removed from the legal agreement, and they also requested the council to review the other infrastructure payments that were associated with that scheme. So to very briefly run through it, this is the application site as it was back in 2016, outlined in red. Slutham Manor, outside the village of Slutham, which is to the north. A23 is over here to the east. Site's in the countryside, quite isolated. It's also in the high wheeled AONB. As members would probably be aware, it was last used as a training centre for Sussex Police. What you had on the site at the time was the attractive manor building at the northern end of the site, and then more modern offices at the back. So the manor house has now been converted into apartments set out in the committee report, and the former office buildings that were at the back have all been demolished. The report refers to riders. That's within the site. I think what was formerly a dwelling was in use as an office at the time of this original planning application. That's now been converted back into a house. And this is the plan that was approved, and where works have commenced to partly implement the scheme. So you've got the planning history set out in section 8 of the committee report. So you've got the original planning permission to convert the manor house into 9 apartments. and for the construction of 15 dwellings, and as I said, the conversion of riders over here into a dwelling. Reserved matters consent was subsequently approved. Then we had a Section 73 application to amend the internal road layout to add an internal road here, and that's what's been built on the site. So what's actually been constructed? Manor house now converted, occupied. These houses, 4 here and 4 here that face into the central courtyard, they've been built, but the remaining houses along here and this flat over a garage, no works have taken place at all on those, and this just remains a cleared area and fenced off. And it's just a couple of photos, it gives you an idea. So these are the houses that face onto that central courtyard, and you can see the area to the south. That's all fenced off when approval exists for houses, but no works taking place. That's a view. That's the manor house, and then you've got the houses that step up. So in terms of this application and the legal framework, that's set out in section 11 of the report. In essence, where a planning obligation predates April 2010 or is over 5 years old, an application can be made to the local planning authority to change that obligation where it no longer serves a useful purpose or would continue to serve a useful purpose in a modified way. So in terms of the assessment of the application, I won't go through it all because it's in the report in section 12. So officers view that the obligation clearly does still serve a useful purpose in that affordable housing is required in the district, infrastructure payments are required to mitigate the impacts of the development and so on. So it still serves a useful purpose. But the next question relates to viability, which is a material planning consideration. And you'll see in the report the applicant's summary of their financial information they've submitted in paragraphs 12.15 and 12.16 of the report. All of that information that the applicants have provided has been independently assessed by viability consultants appointed by the District Council, and their conclusions are set out in paragraph 12.17 of the committee report. And given the views of the consultants that we've commissioned to review all this stuff, it's your officer's view that unfortunately it has been now demonstrated that the scheme isn't viable to provide that affordable housing contribution. You'll see from that the application has been with the council for a long time now. You can see it's got a 2023 reference number. So this has been looked at over a long period of time with information being submitted to the council and being fully assessed. I should also emphasise that it is the affordable housing contribution only that our viability consultants have said isn't viable to be provided now. So the other infrastructure contributions that are set out in the committee report relating to education, libraries, and sports provision, community infrastructure, community buildings, that will all still be provided. It's just the affordable housing contribution that we're looking at. And therefore, whilst it is very regrettable that we're here with this report before members, it's your officer's view that given the advice we've received, there isn't really anywhere else to go with this one. And as I say, it has been looked at very, very thoroughly. And I'd also say this is a very unusual situation in that when the original planning application was made, viability wasn't raised as an issue. So there's no review mechanism or anything in the original planning application because it just wasn't raised as an issue. I think we've had some unique circumstances here in that it is a very bespoke site, and during the construction you then had the COVID lockdowns, etc. So I don't think, in officers' view, this wouldn't set any sort of precedent because this is a unique situation, and it has been, as I say, very carefully assessed. And whilst, as I say, we're not happy to be bringing this recommendation before you because affordable housing, as we know, is a corporate priority. That is the advice that we've received from our consultants. So that's the reason for the recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. King. I was ward councillor for this site for 20 years. Anger courses through my veins on this one, to say the least. Anger, because I actually gave planning permission for this in 2016. And as Mr. King's just iterated, there was no viability issues. So therefore, we didn't have to put in what we've done in the past. Because we've since been caught out on more than one occasion, we've now insert, if there's a viability right at the start, when they get to certain points, they get assessed on whether or not. I mean, we've got to thank our consultants, to be perfectly honest, because they wanted to get rid of all their Section 106 obligations. But when you look at what's left behind, we're talking probably between £230,000 to £240,000 worth of going. I mean, that 645,000 was to go towards an exception site in Hang Cross. So it was well within the parish boundary, but not to be. So we've got to find another source of income for our exception site that we've got up in Hang Cross coming through. Yeah, I'm not happy, but I don't think there's sometimes we can do anything about it. As much as I would love to say on your bike, I don't think we can. Councillor Hitchcock, it is what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Steve's decision. I think we have to pass it. But it just crossed my mind that the planning permission was for all the activities on the site, which included the 9 luxury bespoke.
They are luxury.
And the viability has come in after that's been completed and the profit's been made. So in the new viability assessments, is there an element of flats, apartments in there, which is affecting the viability of the rest of it?
It was to do like an enabling, because those of you who remember the Slutham, I played cricket there when I was in the Met Police against Sussex Police there. It's a very old...
It's beautiful, yeah.
It is a beautiful building. But when the Met Police pulled out, they had loads of different schemes. It was going to be a hotel, it was going to be this, it was going to be that. And as... Can you just leave the room or take it outside, please, Janice? Thank you. Thank you.
I'll have a strawberry shake.
Yeah. I told you a hammer works. I just feel that because of what they did to make it luxurious, and then COVID came along and killed off a lot of schemes, hence the fact we needed our 5-year land supply and we still needed that constant inputting into it. Yeah, I'm angry. I can't say anything, but I've got to face the parish council in a couple of weeks' time and explain to them.
The point I wanted to make was that if they've completed part of the project and they've made their profit, is there not an element of that which should be coming to us if they had a Section 106 agreement?
We didn't have that.
Didn't have it. Yeah. Are we actually going to get absolutely nothing?
240,000.
Yeah, it's...
Well,
But no affordable.
it's peanuts.
Yeah, I know, compared to what it could have been.
Yeah, in terms of the figures that have all been provided, it includes what they've made so far in terms of the development, because the apartments are there. Some are occupied. I couldn't tell you how many, whether it's full occupation as of today, because obviously it changes. The 8 houses around the courtyard, they're built and occupied. But in terms of the amendment that's sought, it is the affordable housing only. The developers did want to, as the chairman says, ask us to revisit everything, and our consultants have said no. They think that there is still sufficient money to be generated from the scheme to provide all those other infrastructure payments. So it's just but it's the affordable housing that would be removed. All the other contributions would remain.
They've not been working on the site for 2 years. Before the election in May last year, my inbox was full of this place.
But COVID affected everybody. It was everybody's risk. It's not just their risk.
No, I know.
So I think that comes out of the equation for me.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it. I
think it's a disgrace.
I think I can't argue.
Absolute disgrace.
I cannot disagree with that, Councillor Hitchcock. My Vice Chair, could you switch off unless you want to, Councillor?
No, I just wanted to say the same. Absolute disgrace, a very good term. I just wondered how it was calculated, how the experts reached their calculation on all this. Were they looking at the viability of the sale of the properties that haven't been completed and what their potential sale value was? And has it been worked out in that way, or is it taken into account the properties that have already been completed and sold?
Yeah, I'm no expert, so this is going to be a very sort of high-level summary, but it is taking account of the costs that the developer has already incurred, because some of those are obviously known now because they've done works. It'll take account of the sales that they've made, because again those things are known now for the units that are sold, and then there's predictions as to the likely costs and likely sales revenue from the remaining buildings that haven't been constructed. So it's a combination of all of them, but the actual technical details of that are complex, and that's why we engage independent consultants to do it, because it is it's a specialised field and a bit of a minefield, I think.
But I do know that they encountered two big things. Is the drainage down there.
Their risk.
I know it's their risk. I can't argue. You're talking to the preacher here. I really am very unhappy with this, because I've got potentially 23 houses that could have been built on the strength of this up in Hayne Cross. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I found the consultant's report interesting, and the viability, what do they call it, rebuttal, interesting, because they demonstrated that house prices in my ward, where I know there's a large number of unsold or unoccupied properties, and their prices are too high. So they're saying, oh, we can't sell these the phase 3 houses for to make the profit that we originally made, and of course they're looking for a continual 20-25% profit margin as well. I mean, so I'm gratified to note that there are 3 phases. Phase 1 and phase 2 are finished and more or less occupied. So we have achieved. You confirmed that we have some Section 106 money towards affordable housing from those. But the third part, the detached houses, my view is that there's another option here, and that is they just don't build them for the moment.
Not going to. They won't build them.
No. So in that case, is that what's leading to them saying, oh, all this Section 106 for affordable would have come from phase 3, because I just don't believe that. It would have come through phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. you know, basically, we need affordable housing desperately.
We do
And
desperately.
you know, people, the house prices that are being charged are too high. These planning applications are going in on the basis of, you know, that isn't viable. So I'm dead against this, and I shall vote against it. Because
I would love to vote against it, but I don't know what you're going to vote against.
well, what I would,
I mean, you can do it, but I don't know if, for argument's sake, all 12 of us decided to vote against it, I would have to ask you for what reasons.
well,
Because
basically,
when they decided to do this, we didn't have in place, there was no viability issues. The market was buoyant. Who wouldn't want to live in a fantastic, you know, place like that? Because it is in a beautiful part of the world, lovely little village. Everybody was hunky-dory. And then reality came in. Perhaps they spent too much money on refurbishing Slutham Manor House itself. I don't know.
well, it's not just that. There's a different view about sustainability now. People don't want to live in remote places. If they can buy a house that's close to a town and it's sustainable, they can get to shops and schools easily. You know, the whole situation's changed.
The only place in Slutham is a really, really good pub restaurant.
I agree.
That's the only thing that Slutham's
But your children
got.
don't eat at
What, sorry?
at the restaurant. They need to go to school. You know, it's just another one of these examples of an unsustainable development, and it's become more unsustainable. They've been delayed during the, you know, I can buy that during the construction because of what's happened. But I think this is quite appalling.
It is. I mean, just today, for those who haven't read any of the news, South Downs have just pulled away. This is the railway. The buses have stopped the 701 from Brighton to Eastbourne on the grounds that nobody uses the buses. So they're going to revisit again in the spring. There is a bus in the actual Staplefield, but that's a heck of a walk to get to the bus from that place. It was never visualised that was going to be on that grounds. Councillor Kenny, I think I could probably put words in your mouth what you were going to say, because I agree with everything you were going to say.
Okay, well, let's have a go at it. So I'm going to start off with a question, and I'll put it really straightforwardly to you, Steve. We've hinted at it. If we vote against, what will happen? And you can mull it over. I've got a few other things to say while you think about, but what will the consequences be if we vote against? I think the statement that our advisors have said, okay, we don't need to ask for it, covers up a really rich story. For my sins, I read both the DSP reports and Savile's rebuttal, and it's a really interesting tale with Savile's deliberately, it seems to me, in my opinion, underestimating the amount of money they will get for the prices that they sell. And DSP trying to put, in my view, a realistic view on that. Also, I noted in DSP's reports that they found it very hard to get to the bottom of what the actual costs had been, that they weren't clearly articulated, that they couldn't be sure about any of those things. I'll be frank with you, my view about the Savile reports is sort of, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? That's what they're paid to do. And when eventually DSP reached the position that they did, it was really on a knife edge. They only say it's on the margin of viability. And they did so after, for example, accepting an increase to the cost base that includes a whole lot of landscaping, hard and soft, that weren't otherwise part of the plan. So in other words, you know, a manipulation of what the proposal is to make it look more expensive. So overall, like everybody, I share anger at this. I would really dearly love to send a message. It seems to me that if we accept it, what we're doing is rewarding behaviour that says if you motivate and pay for highly professional representations, you'll get that. I frankly didn't believe the figures. And here's another very specific question, Steve. For the properties that they have successfully sold, did they reach their expected, their predicted? I think they have. I think they have, and I think therefore there's, I don't see that there's any reason, especially since house prices have increased in mid-Sussex in the last year, I don't think there is any reason whatsoever to feel that they can't meet the DSP's original things. I think that the DSP have been beaten into just retreating. So hence the importance of the question, Steve. What happens next? Because I would really like to put a challenge to them. If we said, no, you can't have it. So what are they going to do? Well, they can bypass the opportunity to make the money out of these houses that they have planning permission for. If they choose not to do that, will the public benefit in mid-Sussex have been lost in any way? That we don't add more luxurious houses which have absolutely nothing to do with our housing shortage figures or the residents of mid-Sussex. So at the moment, I'm leaning towards, I'd be very interested to hear what you say, Steve. If we just say no, it puts the ball back in their court. They've got some assets, they've got some planning permission, mull it over, chaps. You might come to a different view.
In July, this was up for refusal.
Sorry?
In July, this was up for refusal. It was going to come in front of our committee for being refused and say, you're going to pay. But it was put to me by Steve that we could have gone to appeal, they would appeal, and then they would be having that debate that we're having our debate now. Our consultants weren't browbeaten into it. Believe me, we secure the best, and we get this lot to pay for it. You know, we don't. It doesn't cost. I found this out. I always thought we paid for this stuff, but we don't. The developer has to pay our costs for this. But we wouldn't allow this to happen in future, because if there is even a hint of viability, we will revert back to our condition that you have to our first one I ever came across, this one was opposite Sainsbury's, just down the road, where they tried this on. And I said, well, I want to see how many bags of cement they've used, how much sand they used before I agree to any of this, because I do think they are absolutely taking the proverbial, personally. But they will come back at us and they'll go for costs, I can assure you. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the basic question of what is likely to happen, obviously I can't speak for the developers, but were members to say, no, we're not prepared to amend the 106, then there is a right of appeal to the planning inspectorate, and given the developers are putting forward a case that, in their view, it's not viable to make these payments, I would expect that they would exercise that right to lodge that appeal to the planning inspectorate. And given the advice that we've received from consultants we've procured that are agreeing with what the developers have said, I know, as you've read it all to and fro in, and it has gone on for a long time, and I think they have found it difficult to get figures out of the applicants and compare like with like, etc., etc. But they've got to a position where, you know, they've said what they've said. If they were still of the view that the applicants had no case, then they would be saying that. That would have been their advice to us. But unfortunately, it isn't. We have the, you know, what they've said. So yeah, what will happen? Potentially an appeal that we would struggle to defend, given the fact that the people we've asked to give us the advice wouldn't be supporting that case. So we'd have to go and try and find another viability consultant, which might be very difficult, if not impossible.
I mean, the ones we're using now are a lot better than the district valuer we used to have. Years ago, the district valuer, well, he just rolled over and said, tickle my tummy. The ones we use now are very robust.
I just can't resist one comment though, but you know, because the assumptions about the square footage that they will achieve, you know, they compromise down to what are below. So, for example, these guys are still insisting they'll get less than £400 a square foot, and every single one of the properties quoted in all of the areas, no matter how indifferent the site was, were all above that. I can't believe that the assumptions that if there were to be a fresh look at all the figures, and that's why there is one question I asked which we didn't get an answer to, which is, did they achieve their target pounds per square footage on the properties that they have already sold, which would be a track record that they can meet expectations. So you sense how, you know, I'm really reluctant about this, and I'm not convinced that, how can I put it, that, not convinced that we would lose. I think they're in the wrong here. I think they're not.
I don't think they're being totally honest with us, but, you know, our consultant that we've got have served this council very well, and he said even then it was still on a knife edge. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get anywhere with this. And I can't tell you how annoyed I am about this. I have a scheme ready to go up in Hang Cross, so I'm on the parish council up there, that was relying on this money. But we've now not got that money, so it's depriving people who desperately need a house in Hang Cross, because we haven't got that money. Can I go to Councillor Casella before you, John? Yeah.
Right.
Don't touch it.
Right, two possible suggestions.
On him.
One they might be off the wall. Can we suggest to them, instead of paying this money, they actually build some affordable housing instead?
They won't build affordable housing down there. We'll never get an RSL to take that on down there. It's in the valley, and it's miles away from anywhere.
And the other one is, could we actually suspend our decision?
What we
on the basis of the housing market has now stabilised and is taking off again, interest rates are coming down, more people are going for mortgages, the market is taking off, so therefore the returns they may not have been making a year ago when these figures were produced may well totally change in another 6 months.
They submitted a whole load of figures since July.
Yeah.
Because literally we were going to refuse it. We had it on the agenda to refuse it in July. But since July to today, they submitted a whole load of stuff to say, oh, by the way, we've got to give you this. You know, how bad are we?
Yeah, but then the figures they're giving us are certainly under a false pretense now because the whole market has changed.
Well,
they can't produce figures that are worse than the figures they produced before because the market's changed the other way.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I can't deny, honestly, I cannot deny any comment made in this room today. The only thing that I was going to ask you, if we were going this way, is there are about £240,000, give or take, of Section 106, and the parish council have asked me to ask you, could they have some input in, and I asked Steve this, that they could have some input where this money is spent, because we do know in the play space or kickabout in Slough they need some money, and I know some money is needed up in Hang Cross as well. So it could still public benefit, but I've been listening to some serious whispering done to my right. Have you come up with some magical rabbit out of a hat for us, please?
Sounds like a very similar debate I'm having.
Yes.
No, I don't think there's a rabbit out of a hat, so to speak, but I think if members are uncomfortable with the application, instead of a refusal, I mean, there is the option to defer the application, and we could go back to the applicants to see if there's any way if there's any scope for renegotiation or looking again at this whether there's scope for putting any sort of review mechanism into the,
Would that require a new application? Legal, please help us.
Because of the way this legislation works, this application to modify is what it is, and you can't make a decision which is not a response to what they're asking for. So you can't say, we want a different type of Section 106 in that decision. But there's nothing to stop you separately speaking to them about renegotiating a deed of variation and looking again at the options to see, for example, a viability mechanism put into it to allow for an uplift if it was more profitable. But that would have to be outside of this application. So what you'd be looking at is probably, defer it for one cycle or however long to speak to them about changing Section 106 to see if there's something a bit more palatable for both parties. And then if that was reached and an agreement was reached to modify to vary the Section 106 on that basis, then they should then, well, the logical thing with them, they could then just withdraw their application to modify because you've agreed it by negotiation.
I think that's an excellent idea. All right, I'll go for a little rabbit coming out of a hat. You were on the right lines. I like that one. I like that. So I will. Oh, sorry. You've not spoken yet, John. Dick. Don't touch it.
Just a question. If we go back to the developers and talk to them, who's actually going to talk to them? Is it going to be our firm of assessors that actually assess the 106? Are they going to reassess that with them?
I think we can.
Because if that's the case, the developer is paying for that. If that is the case, the developer would pay for that firm that looked at it originally, and they're not going to do that, are they? Sorry?
Yeah, that's Savills, but our own would do something different.
Yeah,
but I think we would tell our consultants that we want to look at, this is what we want you to look at, and this is how we want you to play this. Would that be about right?
Generally speaking, what happens in these sorts of scenarios is that the developer does often fund a third-party independent consultant to act on behalf of the local authority, which is what, that will give, that consultant will look at what's viable and what's not. In terms of actually the discussion with them about whether or not they're willing to consider a Section 106 variation to look at inserting a viability clause. I mean, the council already has standard viability wording for doing this sort of thing. So that initial sort of discussion as to whether or not they would accept that premise wouldn't need to be done through a third party, and you've already got a position. What you'd effectively be looking at is you'd say your baseline viability is what has been agreed as of now with the reports that have already been done, but in the future, actually, can we have a post-completion full review of everything and what the actual costs were, and then is there scope for that to increase, and then you repeat the process on the same basis. Viability mechanisms are always complicated, and I'm not a viability expert, but the basic premise is that a viability assessment is done with projected costs, and then if you think about as you go, things that were projected and estimated become real at some point along, and then but you always should do it on the basis of a reassessment of what was originally done. So it's whether or not there would be scope to sort of do that at some point to then does it generate more than is anticipated at the moment. The questions that everybody's asked about the inputs and how real they are and all those sorts of things, that's always a question, which is, you know, beyond the scope of what I could deal with. But that's the sort of mechanism you're looking at, and you would need the consultant, the same sort of verification process when you get an updated viability assessment in the future to cover that off, to check that what's been submitted is okay and can it afford to pay anything.
I quite like
that's the way it would do.
Yeah.
But I'm going to committee beware, because that's what I'm here for, to beware. They may come back, a new viability expert, and say, well, actually, your first lot were correct, or they're having a laugh. They can afford to pay this, that, and the other. So that's what you've got to take in consideration. But I do like the idea of deferring it and starting it again.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like deferments, but I think in this case, we're talking about affordable homes. And I think that, beyond anything, should be our overriding. We need affordable homes for our residents of Mid-Sussex. Or admittedly, it was going to benefit Ann Cross, but this could have happened anywhere across the district. Councillor DeBell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we're basically saying is, I mean, at the moment, the developer's got nothing to lose. So what we're saying is that we can now vote on a different motion, which is to defer, as we've talked about, and go back to them and see if we can get a better deal. Because, as I say, they've got nothing to lose at the moment, but we've got a lot to lose in terms of what we want for our people. So if that is the case, I would like to propose that instead of what's on the table, that we go for a deferment and it's rediscussed with.
I wouldn't want to lose the 240-odd thousand.
No,
but
but as it has been said, the housing market is changing.
It is, yeah. And costs are going down.
And also the fact that the new government is likely to make it change considerably in all sorts of different ways. So I would like to personally, if that is the case, Mr. Chairman, propose that we go for a deferment. For the
Can I have a
time.
seconder? Oh, Councillor Cherry, you were very quick with that one, weren't you? Can you just check you haven't dislocated your shoulder? Okay, we've heard a new proposal and a seconder, Councillor DeBell and Councillor Cherry, on deferring it for 1 or 2 cycles, if it has to be that way, to start the process as set out, as we just heard. Adequate, the right speak, as they say, will be shared between the 4 of us here, basically, and we'll report back that that's the way it's been. So, Councillor Hitchcock.
Just before we vote on that, and I don't disagree with you, John, I need to hear Steve's view on this, because he's very clearly come out in favour of accepting this.
Oh, I think he said it was a balanced one, but yeah, go on.
Well, he has at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And what I don't want is a big bounce back on Steve and his department and others, and we're going to spend a fortune getting ourselves out of this. That's the problem for me.
There's always an
There's
issue.
2 ways they'll jump. They'll say, yes, we'll have an end of construction reassessment. They won't. The other way they'll jump is to come back with a lower number.
If they come back with a number, which I'll say they won't come anywhere near the 645, but if they come back with 100 or even anything, it's better than nothing. But Steve, do you want to answer that, as you've been directly asked that question?
Yeah, well, I think the motion or the recommendation to defer is fine, and we can go back to the applicants, and we won't know, their position until we ask them. It might be that they say, no, this is what it is. We want to proceed as we are, and if the council refuses it, we'll go to appeal and see what the planning inspectorate makes of it. So we won't know until we ask the question.
So we're not refusing it per se, but it will come back to this committee for refusal.
In that case, I accept the proposal.
Yeah. Councillor Kenny, as last one, last but not least.
Just very quickly, and surely it will be to our advantage with the planning inspector if it comes back to it. We will have put on the sale on an offer. We're not trying to stop them in the tracks. We're trying to reevaluate, get the best for our residents. That must carry some weight, and when and if an appeal and an investigation took place, there's no reason why that wouldn't be on the current state of the market, as opposed to some notional historical backward. So I think it would help in that other circumstance.
I had no sway with Mr. Gove. You might have some more sway with the lady in question than what I have. So we have on the table a motion being put forward by Councillor de Bell, seconded by Councillor Cherry, to defer it for 1 or 2 cycles. So Steve gets a chance to go back to, we'll have a word that we put together, and for it to be looked at again, because I'm happy with that motion, to be perfectly honest, extremely happy for the residents of Mid Sussex, not just Hand Cross. Okay, so can we vote on the new motion? I think we might find this one slightly unanimous. Yep, got 11. No, you can't vote, Janice, because you disappeared. Nick? I know, but you didn't. You went out to switch it off on the. So when you leave the room, So I'm going. It is unanimous, but it was 11 as opposed to 12, which is up on the screen. So if you do have your phone having a hiccup, you've got to switch it off prior to coming into this chamber. Right. Okay. So back into the agenda. Item 8, questions pursuant to Council Rule Procedure 10.2, due notice which has been given. I have none, so I close this meeting at 5:46 because I can be precise. Please remain in your seats until such time as we get the indication that a live feed has been cut.